Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow Public Speaking and Presentations and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and or microphone and or go to the Facebook Live video feed, the link to which I'll now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. Tonight, our featured guests are Spearfisher, the artistic name of Peter John, a pianist and composer, and Zsolt Bognár, a pianist and host of the award-winning Living the Classical Life interview series. We're also pleased to be joined by Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. Peter, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Simeon.
Zsolt, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Simeon. It's good to see you, Peter, as well.
So let's start with getting to know Peter John through the eyes of Zsolt Bognár. Tell us, Zsolt, when did you meet Peter? How and what does he do exactly?
Well, in Peter's case, it's always a question of what doesn't he do. I think I met Peter in Cleveland, where I still live, back in 2005, I think it was. And it's a funny story because I had already been there for 5 years. And each year in a conservatory, you get the influx of new students. And I kept on hearing people say, have you heard Peter John yet? Have you heard his music? Have you heard him play? And I said, no, but who is this guy? You know, I keep hearing about this. So Peter, you were actually a legend before I got to meet and hear you. And then I heard your, yeah, I never told you. I heard your piano compositions. I think there was one in particular, and I was just absolutely transfixed. Then the next thing I know is I think I met you at one of the just random gatherings that we used to go to.
Yeah,
and I quickly,
house. Yeah.
I quickly realized that Peter is an incredibly reactive person, an incredibly sensitive person to assimilate what is in this world. He is so open to discussing everything that's going on. And that's why I'm so happy to join all of you here today, because Peter has over the years become one of my best and closest friends. And we always like to talk about life, not just music, but life and everything that makes music tick.
Okay, and Peter, AKA Spearfisher, tell us who is Zsolt Bognár and how did you become friends? What does Zsolt do?
Man, you know, Zsolt, it's so nice to hear these things about yourself that we never get to tell each other because we're shy or something, or we're not even in touch with all those things all the time. But like Zsolt, I met him in the practice rooms many years ago, and he was just a fantastic pianist, and we had such a shared love of true artistry. And you know, the biggest thing about Zsolt, I think, is his willingness to be vulnerable. And because I was thinking about what's the root of artistry, you know? What's the root of passion? And we think it may be vulnerability. First, we have to be vulnerable with ourselves, right? We have to be able to look at ourselves and say like, hey, I messed up, like I've got problems, but it's okay. And then we have to share that with other people. And once we have that, we form these connections where you realize we all have these problems. And Zsolt is able to invite vulnerability in other people. So it was many years ago in the practice rooms, you know, and goofing around and listening to Richter and Sokolov and all these great pianists, and just having a love of real artistry. And oh man, those parties, we had so many great parties, and we had, we'd be improvising on the piano or goofing around and making up songs, and it was we had great years in Cleveland. But yeah. That's
Okay.
Peter, I always remembered getting together with you in the evenings. And by the way, for people who are not familiar with the conservatory life, you typically practice all the way until school closes, which in our case in Cleveland was midnight.
yes,
So after that,
every day.
we would all get together and sort of decompress and just sort of talk about the day. And so we'd have, Peter, you had this, when it would get into our 9-month winters in Cleveland, you had this fire pit, and
Yep.
we would sit around
Yep.
there and have, you would make us tea or coffee, and we would just sit there for hours just talking about things, really trying to get into whatever it was that we were trying to get into.
Man, yeah. So that's, but yeah, that's Zsolt. And can I, and actually, this is why I thought of him when you called me, Simeon. We were talking about the show, and I felt I was a little scared to come on today. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it, and Simeon was so kind of understanding and also kind, and he was just really helped me feel comfortable. And he was like, hey, we're all here for you, man. We're all here on this together. And like, and when he said that, and he told me about his story as, a broadcaster and finding his passion, I thought about, that's when I thought about you, Zsolt, and that's why I thought about you. Because it was funny, as we talked, about why am I having you on the show today, or why do we decided, why Simeon, or where it came from, and that was it. And that, I've seen that same ability of you to pull out someone's story in a way that's not pulling it out, but in creating a space of invitation, and that's, I think, how you, as a pianist, started, but then have grown into like the fullness of your personality, the wholeness of our personalities.
Wonderful. So we'll discuss that in a little bit. Let's take a look at, let's stay in the Cleveland years right now, and let's take a look at Peter John performing as a master's student.
Yeah. Oh, Carlos, could you? Yeah.
So Peter John.
Sorry, we're having some technical issues right now. Somebody needs to be muted. There we have it. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Let's return to our performance.
Yeah, that's good, Simeon. Thanks.
So Peter, tell us a little bit about this Ravel recording. When we hear you play and we see you play, I mean, it looks like total ecstasy. It looks like, this is a guy who doesn't care about eating. He doesn't care about really anything besides that moment. I mean, he's really, it's Zen. I mean,
it's funny to watch myself because I'm so physically demonstrative. And this is like, since a little boy, I've just had this love, and this joy in music. And over the years, I've trained myself how not to just show it in my body, but let it come in my fingers more. And this is something I was still learning, I think, back then, but it is nice to see me just be totally free, totally open, and not caring. Do you know what I mean? I didn't care how I looked or appeared, and yeah, I think it's even though a little maybe embarrassing now, it's great to see, that just being okay with, yeah. But it's a beautiful piece. I love it. I loved finding all these little voices. I haven't played it in years, but you know, or those little tiny moments, and this is something, yeah. Sergei would show so well in his lessons. I used to sit in on his lessons, and my teacher Antonio Papabaldi would show just these, how to create colors of sound, it's like that was what really interested me in classical piano, and still does, is what's outside of the notes, what's in between the notes, all those feelings and things. So yeah.
Okay, let's take a
Pete,
look now at, yes, Zsolt? Sorry.
I'm so sorry to jump in. I just wanted to say, Pete, I think you perfectly touched on what we were talking about, sort of a lead into the subject of vulnerability. I think the fact that you characterized yourself as being so free and open at that time and just not caring, I think that really, first of all, represented you as a person. I think that this balance of what we try to pursue in our human lives and our musical lives, if we want to separate those arbitrarily, I think it's really one and the same thing. And so it was great to see that video. I hadn't seen you.
Yes. And Joe, this is what Sergei would talk about. This is I feel like he had a great understanding of this, and had this just warm approach to the instrument. And I saw this passion in you. I remember when I turned pages, who was that violinist? You were playing Prokofiev's second violin sonata, or first.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
and it was in. Anyways,
was it Sarah McElravy?
No, it was a guy. Anyways,
okay.
But I was turning pages, and I remember you just had built up this wall of energy, and it was so cool to see this. And we have such different personalities. We're very, very different people. But I saw that same energy, or the way you played Beethoven or Brahms. You built up this, incredible energetic space, and that was so cool. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Let's take a look at it. Let's see Zsolt's pianism from that time at the Cleveland Institute of Music. I will tell everybody that the volume's a little bit low, so you may have to turn your volume up. Just remember to turn it down when we finish the video.
My whole reason for being a musician is because of Schubert Lieder. I remember a recital that I heard in Cleveland, where I live, of Ian Bostridge, the tenor, and he sang an entire evening of Schubert. And I remember having the feeling that Schubert's music can really bring time to a standstill. So for me, I'm always searching for that magic in the music, and always in the vocal style. That's something that I've always tried to emulate. I've always tried to learn from the great singers. It's very important for me to look in the music, also to note that the differences in additions that I use, and I try to look at every addition that I can find, the additions can have huge differences, and for me sometimes that makes a big difference in what the music is saying, or in a phrase. And that can get very, very specific, but I really like to know what the composer had in mind. I would say that making my first recording is quite an intimidating experience. Philip Nadel really made it as easy as he possibly could. He really listened to what I was trying to say and really tried to encourage that. I think that the best producers really work in a collaboration with the artist, and one plus one becomes three. I love this. And Philip's credentials speak for themselves. He's worked with many of the artists I've admired when I was growing up. So working here was an exciting challenge.
Great. So Zsolt, tell us about this. Was your CD?
Yes, this was a CD
the first CD that you produced or that you recorded?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that that was already 11 years ago because it feels like just yesterday. This was an amazing, you know, if you're going to make your first recording, speaking of intimidating, that is really, you're making kind of your first statement, and you have to decide what's going to be on that recording. Is it ready? So I decided I would record music that for me resonated on a level that I just couldn't be without it. I remember when I first heard those Schubert pieces, I literally couldn't sleep for a few nights. I just felt like I was in this feverish state, and I said, what's going on? It's, you know, I want to play that music, but I also can't not play that music. I feel like it was just the chosen thing to do. So this was back in my Cleveland days. I started performing most of these pieces that wound up on the album. I started performing them across the next 10 years. And I said, well, if 10 years isn't long enough, I guess it'll just never be ready. So I finally just took the plunge and decided, yeah, speaking of vulnerable, just put it all out there. Try to really pour absolutely everything in it. And the recording, which I made in Berlin, it was just such an inward experience. It was so intense. There was a blizzard going on across those 3 days. I would record late at night. And so, yeah, it was something that I was very proud of, but I felt like I was only part of a larger process that included the music. You know, it's so funny watching this video now again after many years. I'm reminded of the fact there was a viewer who actually criticized me. He said, Joel, you're moving around so much at the keyboard, you need to cut it out. You know, you were obviously trained to do it that way. And I said, well, no, actually, my teachers always insisted that I stay absolutely still. I was the bad one, you know, I was the one who broke the rule. You know, that's been sort of a theme in my life. I always have just kind of done things my own way, for better or for worse. I've just done whatever has resonated with me. I listen to hopefully constructive feedback. But this type of attitude of just pursuing my passions has informed sort of a lot of things that unfolded in my life, whether it be the show that I host, living the classical life, or talking about other subjects in life. That's just been my way.
I'm sorry, Simeon, can I hop in for just 1 second too, before we move on to the next topic? I'm sorry. You know, Zsolt, another interesting to note about this thing, this was Zsolt's debut recording and his debut video, and he spent a lot of time and a lot of money on it. And you notice he talks about the producer, you know, and like that's you see that selflessness, you know, and yeah. By the way, what was that second piece? That second piece was gorgeous. This deep, low baritone. What?
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of baritone, so this was a song. So the album was structured as pieces by Schubert and pieces by Liszt, but Liszt was one of the earliest proponents of Schubert's music. So he transcribed a lot of the songs to piano. So that's what it was. It was
okay. The Liszt transcriptions. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wow, it was a really spooky piece called "The Doppelganger."
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Yes, I remember. I know this one. Okay. But I hadn't heard that transcription. Sorry.
So, Professor Lino Rivera, I'd like to bring you in. Hearing these two gentlemen play, talk, it's like just like it's appropriate that Zsolt said he was playing a Liszt transcription, because I feel like I'm at home with Liszt and Hans von Bülow at their students at a group lesson or something. I mean, this seems exactly they seem like the students you would really want at a conservatory.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to meet you, Peter and Zsolt. Zsolt, I'm actually a subscriber of your Living the Classical Life, and I
Oh,
have
love it.
yeah, and I have watched at least two of the interviews that I could remember. Is your interview with Vladimir Ashkenazi and with Mark Andre Hamelin, and it's just really fascinating. That's how I got to know you. When I saw you today, it's like, my goodness, I know this guy. So anyway, I have a lot of questions, but I'm just gonna start with one. How do you find the right questions to ask your guests in that Living the Classical Life? Because the key to any successful interview and meaningful and substantial show is to ask the right questions. How do you find those questions?
Wow. First of all, thank you so much for the words. I'm always so tickled to know when people know of the work that I do, because I never know. That's the thing. It's in an online format. I never know who's out there because they're not listening live, as for example, we can have a live sort of discussion here. For me, it's a lot about feeling, trying to sense their world. And how I try to do that is work together with, well, now I have a small team of writers where we do a lot of research about the life of the guest. But when I'm there in front of the guest, I really just try to sense everything about them by just listening really, really carefully. You get a lot of cues visually through body language and their tone of voice as to what they're going through when they recall certain things about their lives. So one of the things I love to do in the beginning, and we don't always leave that in the episode, is I will ask them about early experiences of theirs in music, because everyone starts remembering things. Oh, my mom did this for me, my dad, oh, and I attended this inspiring performance. Once they get in that zone, then I know I can really go further into their world without making them feel like it's a sudden attack into a really personal zone. And I try to use a whole this is so funny for me to recall it this way, because I was such a shy kid growing up. I didn't really talk to anyone. But when I start talking to these guests, I really think I take the experience of knowing what that felt like in creating an empathetic zone, a zone where they feel like it's okay to share things of, if we're talking about vulnerability, the things that made them inspired, the things that made them passionate, and the things that made them intimidated and depressed and set back. And so I sit there in front of a guest and I start going through all of those things that I just mentioned, and I feel like in a way it's a performance, because I'm reacting on things. And I think I saw in a very different way, but somewhat similar, the same thing in Peter, because he sits there and he listens to you, and he's so reactive on everything, and he'll encourage whatever you're saying. I mean, with me, I said so much BS at that period, and he would always be swept up in it and encourage me. So I think it's this kind of this synergy, if I could put it that way. It's synergy. I get something from the guest and I try to give it back to them.
Lino, and if I can say, we will discuss this a little bit later in the show.
Okay.
We'll have more talk about living the classical life. So let's get back to Peter's, how shall I say, his moving from classical music, playing Ravel with such passion, to a kind of more, how can I say, not classical music. Let's take a look right now. So tell us a little bit about this. It sounds like kind of pop music, kind of minimalist. You went from being a pianist more to a composer, or being a Peter John musician,
Yeah,
aka
you know,
Spearfisher?
I've always, you know, since a little boy, I've loved improvisation. So it's always been, I would just sit at the piano and just play, you know, and my mom would get mad at me and she would say, "You're not practicing, practice your pieces." And I would be like, do, 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 you know, and this is where that like kind of my real musical voice was. And I never stopped improvising. I improvised, I mean, every day in Cleveland before I started practicing. And it was from that was the pool of inspiration, because it's like those are like the Lego bricks of music, you know, is our scales, our chords, you know, and then from there we can build whatever we want. And yet I didn't start focusing on my composition and my improvisation and that kind of thing until much later in life. And then it, you know, when that happened, I think this was at the beginning of this period as I'm switching over to doing more things with electronic music and recording, which is what I do a lot of today. And yeah, there was a lot of things going on then. And but what I found was yeah, a real learning. It was a real learning process of being able to accept that, you know, you feel like a failure when you stop. You feel like you can't do piano. You know what I mean? I felt like a failure. And so but it was actually then, and that after I felt like that I said, but you know, you explore other parts of yourself that are just different. And you say, hey, I'm not just a pianist. I'm not just a this, like I am me, you know?
So
and
Peter,
and
tell
I'm
us, when did you talk about failure? So when did that happen? So I imagine you're talking about that you wouldn't earn your living from playing Ravel's Sonatine. Is that so when did that happen, and how did that evolve?
gosh, you know, that was in you know, I don't remember the dates. I'm so bad with dates. It was a long time ago. You know, I was a kid, but I was doing a lot of these piano competitions, which, as we all know, are nightmarish and exhausting. And I was, you know, I would get into some of the final rounds or get close to things, but I wasn't winning big prizes. And I realized, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this full time to make my living, and it's so insanely competitive, you know. And then I also, you know, it's not financially viable for so many people, and yet our schools train so many people how to do this thing. So it's like we're churning out this world of broken people who, you know, but we have to find that brokenness and then make ourselves whole, you know, by finding what is it that truly drives us, and understanding, like, you know, just like Zsolt understood about his own empathy for other people, that became a career for him, you know, as I understood about my own joy in improvisation. I didn't value that in myself. I didn't value my own improvisations. I thought they were worthless trash because no one ever taught me how to do it, or you know, I was encouraged by people, but you know what I mean.
Let's take a look now at this answer to, like you said, to what you believed was worthless.
Oh, can I give a little prelude to this? Can I give a little prelude?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so this piece we recorded live. We recorded with choir. This was with Jocelyn Hagen. You know, collaboration's been a big part of me, and what I love to do is working with other people. She is a fantastic composer. She does a lot of things for choir and is really well known, especially in the choral world. So what we did is we would go to North Dakota, visit this choir, and I would record the choir doing all sorts of crazy, weird stuff. And I turned all those crazy experiments I did with the choir into synthesizers. So then I had this set of synthesizers that I was playing with, and I would freely improvise on the piano. This introduction is a freely improvised introduction. It was different every single take, you know. But I got a take I like, but and I had a structure where I was going chordally, but it starts out with this kind of free improvisation, and then the whole piece was built on that spirit of improvisation, playing the choir live on those synthesizers. So that's what you'll be seeing. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's take a look.
That's good. Yeah.
Wow. So it's kind of like, has a lot to do with what Zsolt said when I asked him to describe you at the beginning. And he said, well, what doesn't he do? That seems to be like your Cleveland recital, yet you invited everybody on stage to participate with you. Seems like a big party.
Yes, it's this piece was so fun to do. It was so cool. I'm so grateful for Jocelyn to let me just like experiment with this choir. And you know, we're actually doing another project coming up in this next year. We're going to be writing another piece together. But you should check out her music, Jocelyn Hagen. She's fantastic. And you know, and the poet Nikia Cheney, who did a fantastic job with the text. It's really beautiful. So yeah.
And so, Peter, also, this is one of your most popular works. You said that you've been invited to many places to perform this. That's not the case?
No, yeah, I have been invited to play it with different choirs. I was actually going to San Diego, where my uncle lives. Well, not anymore. Well, not San Diego. I'm sorry. But he doesn't live there anymore. Anyways, I was going to go to California and play at San Diego State, and that was at the beginning of COVID. And I was going to play this piece with the choir there. That was my first concert that got canceled. And nowadays I'm not doing really concerts as much, This piece was so stressful to perform. It was a nightmare. It was technologically, I'm doing a lot of things that I really learned on the fly, and my computer sometimes would get to 99% on stage, you know, and I realized if it went to 100, I would lose all sounds and it would crash out. So, you know, and since then I've learned how to do the technological side of fixing these things. But it's an incredible gift to just have a piano as an instrument. And if something goes wrong with your piano, you know, no one will be like, oh, you know, that note stopped sounding. Well, you know, they'll understand. But, you know, if someone sees you on stage and then everything just stops, it's with electronic music, it's a different kind of terror that I had yet to experience. But this piece, since then, I've been doing a lot more like pop music, and the stuff I'm putting out on Spotify and other music business stuff, doing ad work. That's getting more attention now than like this stuff that I did.
So let's take a listen to this next piece, which you wanted to put in because exactly like you said, it's really pop. Here it is, Shallow Waters.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Can you stop singing? Can you stop? I sent you the wrong link. This piece became, this is actually kind of cool. I want to send you the correct link. Maybe I'll let you talk to Zsolt for a moment, but it shows the actual pop process. So I made this as an instrumental track, and then I sent it off to a singer to do a top line on it. So, and he's a guy I've worked with a lot, Michael Shines. So that's what you just heard now is kind of what I had sent to this guy, Michael Shines. And then it became what I'll send you in just a second. So yeah, do you want to just.
Okay, let's hear it. Sure. Great.
If you could talk about something else for a moment so I don't.
Zsolt, and so the reception of Peter's music, when you see, you witness something like his choir work. You consider him still a pianist, or is he now a pop musician, or what's your perspective?
What always fascinated me about Pete is how intuitive he is as a musician. For me, I always grew up thinking that music, classical music, if that's what we want to call it, that was my intended pursuit at the time. It seemed like music was about following the instructions, getting everything to a T, get all of your I's dotted, crossing your T's, and it was following the instructions. For me, as such, I remember even one dinner party that we went to, we were doing a couple of different things at a piano. We were doing some sight reading, and then we were doing a little bit of improvisation. Now, I feel more comfortable sight reading something because that is about following the score and the instructions there. And then Pete seemed nervous about that, and then it came to the improvisation part, and I got nervous about that because I'm not that kind of intuitive musician, and that's where Pete really excels and finds his freedom. Not that classical isn't his zone either. It just shows that our backgrounds have led us in the different paths that we found ourselves today.
Yes, that was such a good point, Zsolt. I mean, you know, and seeing different types of artistry in different people, but it's their artistry is reflective of their personal stage and personal growth in their life, you know. Anyways, okay,
here we go. So here is the like you said, Peter, the final product.
Yeah, this is what it turned into. Yeah.
Okay.
Say, don't wait up for me. but I could never sleep. Pulling coffee cups down at midnight. Why does the overnight show its teeth and bite when I gently asked it to play night? Can't nobody love you through the telephone. Bad hearts multiply. Nobody ever got the wings to fly. Trust is hard to please. Everybody telling me that trust is free. Ain't never rode the ride to the carnival inside my mind. Love and love you. Do we fall asleep inside our words? Love am I trying to do? Do we fall asleep inside our words?
So, wow, what a lot of variety, what always a music that's very, very lively. So, Peter, thank you so much for showing us your incredible journey from classical pianist to everything. Great musician. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Peter, that was amazing. You know, tell me, when we were going to conservatory in Cleveland, did you picture that any music like what we just heard could be part of your palette, or was that already?
No. I mean, well, okay. When I was in high school, I quit this. Okay, I remembered what happened. I quit piano, and my friend Thomas was like, "You need to start taking piano again," because up to that point, I had never chosen piano for myself. My parents had I mean, I loved it, but my parents made me practice. I hated practicing. I loved improvising, but I hated practicing. But I had to learn how to practice. And it was when I went back to my teacher, William Ellsroth, in high school, that I found a deep love in myself for music. And it was around that same time I saved up all my money. I worked at a dishwasher at a local restaurant, saved up $2,000 to buy a Roland keyboard. And I made an album when I was 15 years old of electronic keyboard music when I was 15. And I sold it to all my friends and tried to make money. And I'd play shows in town, but it never took off. But, you know, so it's funny, I didn't see a future in that and this improvisatory side for a long time. I saw it just in the piano side. And when I knew you, I was just so focused on piano. But I've realized that I have a wholeness of love for the entirety of music in all these different expressions. So it wasn't just piano or just this other thing. It was, you know, all of those things. And so as I find myself diving more and more into production music, I miss classical piano more and more, you know. And as I find myself diving, as I found myself diving into classical piano, I missed improvisation and creation more. So I need it all, you know, to fulfill me. So there you go.
Fantastic. So let's take a look now at Zsolt's work. Zsolt, can you tell us a little bit about that journey from the video you made at your first, during the production of your first CD to this interview series?
Yeah, it just struck me that the show is more related than I thought it was to this conversation already. I mean, I was literally asking questions. Peter mentioned earlier about this feeling, are we going to become a success? Or we fear failure? And of course, what is the definition of being a musician today? What is our definition of success? I think it's probably really different from what we think of as a musician in the 20th century. If it's classical music, does a classical musician have to do only that? Around the time that I graduated from conservatory, or just around then, just before, I just started literally asking my colleagues, what do you do? You know, how do you feel more secure on stage? How do you deal with nerves on stage? And how do you find a career path? And these questions literally became my journey, because we were trying to, a small group of friends and myself. Actually, this is funny.
Was it Zsolt and Friends? What was the title?
It was called Zsolt Bognár and Friends at that time, because I needed to put together a website for my personal being a pianist. And by the way, Peter was the one who made that first website for me. And,
I did. You're right.
and some friends and I decided, well, we need to film something, some intro about you so that you can introduce yourself. Something like this, but it didn't quite work out that way. And the idea shifted a bit and I turned the tables. I started asking my friends and colleagues about the way they found their paths. And that eventually became the show. And I would, to really briefly sum it up, I was just selfishly asking the questions that would most help me. And it seemed like a lot of people are in the same boat. And so they found the same, hopefully guidance from the guests I had. And Simeon, what we can do here with this clip, just in the interest of time and moving it along, let's just show you, John, maybe a few seconds of her playing after her remarks.
Okay, let's take a look at it. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding the screen. There it is. Okay, here we go.
It's very different, you know. Sometimes I feel so amazing. People are like, oh yeah, it was pretty perfect, but a bit boring. And sometimes when I'm so nervous, like I don't even know what the next note is. And then like I'm struggling with how to make this work. And people will be like, that was so brilliant. So I guess the element of nervousness, of struggling, of searching feels uncomfortable. I remember telling many acts, he's like, what's your problem with this piece? Sounds good. I was like, I just feel so uncomfortable. It's like, honey, you're paid to be uncomfortable on stage. It's like, why? But it could be so nice. But the element of that uneasiness, it's probably what makes a magic, but it feels bad for me. Yeah. Gosh. That's pretty dumb. The question. Tell me to stop, otherwise I won't.
That was amazing.
Oh, wow.
Wow. So tell us a little bit, so Zsolt, so this is your new forte then, is getting the best out of other musicians, like you said, speaking to them about their lives and about what they do, that same passion, those fireside chats you talked about in Cleveland with Peter, but they're with the most renowned performers in classical music today?
I think it's all connected. And, you know, earlier Lino asked, how do I come up with the questions? And I think, you know, sometimes I don't really have to do any of the work. I think Yuja there just summed up the fact that sometimes it's all our vulnerability, our struggle that becomes the magic. And I try to just go with that theme and see where it goes, because she's obviously having so much fun there. And I think this journey has become an unexpected, you know, Peter was just saying he never expected when he was in conservatory to be doing that world of music that we heard from him. I never expected to be the host of a show. It just accidentally turned out that way, that this was based on my own curiosities and following that path. And so there it is, living the classical life. It's just what's unfolded.
And I want to jump in for a second. I'm so sorry, Simeon. She hit on such a deep truth there. Wasn't that about her struggles and it being the beautiful thing? That was so true. I felt that same thing and had the same similar reactions from people when I thought I played terribly, and I've heard you discuss your own playing and be like, oh, I played terrible. And I was like, it was amazing. What a great truth. Anyways, okay.
So I'd like to bring back in Professor Lino Rivera. Lino?
Peter, I just want to second that because I tell you, there were performances of mine that's like, oh God, that did not go very well. And people would come up to me, exactly the same thing. What? I could not believe it. And I don't know if they're lying to me or what, but I think they're very genuine. Okay, so my question for Zsolt, how do you get all of these big name artists, I mean, they are huge names, to come to your show? It's either, I would think, you have a lot of money to pay them, or you have a lot of power and connection to get them to your show. Please tell us.
Well, I wish I had a lot of money to be able to throw around. However, as the show started, as we mentioned before, it was originally Zsolt Bognár and Friends because it was supposed to be something about me. I was lucky to benefit from the fact that my upstairs neighbor at the time was Daniil Trifonov, who was also going to school with us. We were studying in the same studio, and I asked him to be part of my project, I called it at that time. So he agreed. One of our producers then sent it to Yuja, and she watched it and she says, I'd love to do that. In fact, it was so funny what she said in her response. She said, wow, that was so intimate and so confessional. Are you going to do that with me too? And I said, wow, I guess that's where you want to go. At the same time, so it was really three of them. So, and it was all based on kind of my friendships. Stephen Huff, another pianist, he agreed to be on. And so after people saw these three rather prestigious names, it became a little bit easier to invite others on. However, people only see the results of the show of people who said yes. To this day, there's still, a lot of people who don't respond or they say no, and that's fine.
Okay, so my next question is, how much research do you do for each one of your guests in order to be prepared? Because you need to be intelligent there. You can't just be like a Dumbo in the interview. You need to prepare for that. How much of that do you do and how?
Well, okay, so there are two things that I would say there. The first is that I try to research every existing interview that they have out there and to view their performances. And then I try to organize my narrative. However, the second thing is that I realized later that great preparation doesn't necessarily lead to a better conversation feature. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite. So what people told me was that it's better to be informed, yes, but just to follow your curiosity with these guests. And following the curiosity, again, that's exactly what we're talking about within our musical lives or our lives as human beings in general, following the curiosity and following the passion.
Wow. So tell us, both of you, let's start with Peter, looking back now on where you came from, those fireside chats in Cleveland at midnight when the conservatory closed, and becoming a pianist of a completely different kind, a musician of a completely different kind in Peter's case, and a musician of a completely different kind in Zsolt's case. What do you think about when you look back at those years, and where are you headed now?
That's a good question. I'm kind of thinking about it. Gosh, I'm just so grateful for having such great friends throughout my life and having so many great teachers and a great family, that has supported me. And those are things that we have to really cherish and be grateful for. And I feel like there's a stuff I don't like or wish had been different, but man, as I go forward, I want to get back in touch with my passion again, because I felt disconnected from my passion recently, to be perfectly frank. And it's been so distressing. It has been one of the saddest things of my life. And I'm learning about why they happened. And that's where I came to vulnerability, you know, that I haven't been vulnerable with myself, because before we become vulnerable with someone else, we're vulnerable with ourselves. And we say, hey, you know, that's what I was thinking about. And so going forward, business-wise, music-wise, I'm doing a bunch of ads right now. I'm doing stuff. I'm under all these contracts that I can't talk about, but I do stuff for TV and film. I've done some ads. I think I can talk, like I did a trailer for the TV show Chucky on Sci-Fi. I did the first 10 seconds of the TV show The Prom on Netflix, the trailer for that. And I'm working on a lot of other things that I can't really talk about, sorry, but you'll see them and you'll never know it was me. And but I'm really excited to explore my passion and not just my business, because as my business stuff has grown, I want to meld them more, you know, and always, and yeah, so by engaging lightly too with my own music, I found myself engaging lightly with myself, and I want to engage more deeply with music, more deeply with myself. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to.
Okay, so Peter, we have a quick question from Lino wants to ask you, Lino.
Yes, Peter. You see, my venue for my improvisation is being a church musician on Sunday mornings. I'm trained as a classical pianist, just like both of you. Now, there would be instances wherein I would improvise, and people after the service would come up to me and it's like, "What was that piece that you just played during the meditation?" And I said, "I don't know. I improvise it, and I can't recreate it because it happened at the moment." My question to you is, how do you feel about those moments when you improvise something that really affected and engaged people, but you can't do it again because it's gone during the moment?
I mean, isn't that so special? You know, it's what a gift, right? That's the gift, right? That's it. It's the ephemeral moment that's gone, right? You know, just like us here in life. Here we go. You know, I don't know. Here we all are in this life, and you know, we'll all be gone too. And you know, regardless of belief or whatever. But what a beautiful thing. You know, I think, you know, how grateful and how beautiful that you could share that with someone, and that's really cool.
Okay.
So you don't feel a sense of regret or loss?
Oh yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, yeah. But this is what I tell myself, you know, and what we have to tell ourselves. I don't know. So, both of them are okay, you know. It's really okay. It's okay to feel loss, and then it's okay to move on.
Thank you, Peter.
Zsolt, can you tell us what do you think about when you look back and looking forward?
Well, I know we're almost out of time, but what Pete just said really interests me. I'm not sure that I have all the answers, but when I hear of a passionate person, a curious mind, and a capable artist, like Peter said, struggle to connect with passion is a real one. I think it's constant reassessments and the reconnection that inform the richness of our lives as musicians and as people. So I want to know about this sort of thing. I see that pretty much everyone I've spoken to has gone through that. I think that if we have passions, there will be plenty of people who want to celebrate that with us. And if we have struggles, I think we have a lot more friends in those struggles than we realize. And so that will continue to be my guide wherever it takes me.
Simeon, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we did this today. I'm so, you know, thank you so much, and for also letting us derail the conversation completely.
That's how we've always been that way, Peter. We derail everything.
Whoop! Whoa! Whoa! Anyways.
Part of the improvisatory nature of Peter John, aka
Thank you so
Spearfisher,
much
and
for
Zsolt
having us.
Bognár, with pleasure. So let's see how we can stay in touch with Peter John, aka Spearfish.
Spearfisher, yeah. And thank you everyone for watching. Thank you. Yeah.
So here is his website. So Peter, to contact you, it's sprfshr.com.
Well,
and
you can go to Spearfisher Music.
Here.
You can look at, just if you type in Spearfisher in Google, you'll see like all my music. It comes right up. So.
And we can listen to those tracks we listened to today?
Yes.
There it
Yep,
is,
there's
Shallow
Shallow
Waters,
Waters.
right
Yeah,
there.
and these are a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, so.
Wonderful. So again, that's sprfshr.com, Spearfisher Music.
Or you can
And
just
let's
Google
take a look at Zsolt. Stay in touch with Zsolt, zsoltbognár.com. And Zsolt, to contact you, we just click on the contact right there, I imagine.
Yes, and you can also just informally find me on Facebook or Instagram. I should be there.
Wonderful. And to watch Living the Classical Life, all we have to do is just click there. There we have
Mhm.
Anne-Sophie Mutter available. And I believe these are, so we just have to click on their photos and we can see
Yep,
their
you can do
interview.
that. And everything is also on YouTube.
Look at that. The names, the who's who in classical music. Wonderful. So that's Living the Classical Life with Zsolt Bognár, and it's livingtheclassicallife.com, or you can access it from his website. Wonderful. So thank you very, very much to Peter John, aka Spearfisher, and to Zsolt Bognár for a great show.
Thank you, Simeon. Thanks for having us. And thank
So,
you all.
let's take a look at what's coming up next week. We have Natalia Villanueva Garcia, Thrive, Transform, and Move Forward. Who am I and how can I become myself are the fundamental questions that Natalia Villanueva Garcia believes every individual is confronted with. As a counseling psychologist, she works with quote unquote natural persons to promote their personal development as human beings. Furthermore, as a business consultant, she works with quote unquote legal persons to promote organizational and management development. Are personal and professional affairs really of any difference? Come welcome Natalia, academic expert at the Sigmund Freud University, Vienna, and managing director of the Max Steiner Orchestra, to our show for a new perspective on professionally personal success. As always, all upcoming shows and information may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. That's again, Natalia Villanueva Garcia, Thrive, Transform, and Move Forward next Wednesday. Once again, thank you so much to Peter John, aka Spearfisher, to Zsolt Bognár, and to Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. Thanks very much to Agnieszka Rivolet for her support of this show. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants, who make it all worthwhile. From Vienna, Austria, from Cleveland, Ohio, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the Bay Area, California. Goodbye. See you next week.